So, one of the things that I'm kind of interested in is all those little ditties or poems or something that your dad used to say, used to like to sing or whatever, because I've heard some of them over the years. But just remind me of some of um, those things he used to say or
Yeah,
sing.
well, he was grew up after the war and the Depression, and there was a lot of attempt to pick people's spirits up with music and with entertainment. Obviously, no television yet, but the music industry would come up with these ditties, and the big bands and so on would play the music, and it even for Dad, who didn't really follow a lot of that culture, he picked those tunes up, and then he would get up early always to make breakfast, and he'd be singing around the kitchen very often in the morning, just stuff that came into his head. He was just having a good time fixing this breakfast, and so he cut into a little maresy dotes and dozy dotes and little lambsy divey and just nonsense stuff. And then he would sing, keep on the sunny side, always
Right.
on the sunny side, keep on the sunny side of life. Um,
So
yeah,
did he make some of it up as he was or it was things he'd heard?
yeah, just stuff he'd heard. He wasn't really a writer uh, or a musician, but he could remember, and he could remember the tunes and stuff that he would entertain us with other times too, I guess, when we were taking those long trips down to Portland to visit the family.
Right.
He would get stuff going in the car just to keep the kids occupied. I remember the ditties about the the states. Each one of the states figured into some kind of song about um, Washington, of course, where he was from, um, and just trying to think of a few of these. Idaho, what did Idaho, boys? What did Idaho? She owed a Washington, boy. She owed a Washington,
Oh,
and each of the states would figure into, and somebody's composed this. I don't know. Maybe it was even at college in his college years that some of the kids were singing this stuff. That wasn't so much a popular tune, I don't think. But he came up with so many uh, of those things he could remember, and then he would tell those stories at night. Um, and I suppose it was more when we were really younger, but I can remember a few of them that went on because the girls were younger, and he would tell them their stories. It was a dark and stormy night in the Ozarks. Around the campfire sat brigands young and brigands old. The captain turned to his trusty lieutenant and said, Antonio, tell us a story. And Antonio would say as follows. It was a dark and stormy night in the Ozarks. Around this campfire sat brigands young, and on, around and around that story would
how
go
many times would he do it?
until we were tired of it, or he had to go and do something else,
Uh-huh.
feed the cows. But
He had a couple of those that just went round
yep,
and round.
Mrs. Murphy had a turnip, and it grew behind the barn, and it grew and grew and grew, and never did anybody harm. Now that was a popular kid's story, I think, and it's
Oh,
been written
okay.
up in books and different versions of it. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's just in folklore originally, way back.
I don't remember you saying that one.
Well, I can't remember much more of
Oh,
that,
oh, okay.
but I'm sure it's on Google now.
Oh, yeah.
So that'd be something to chase down some of these little things as we think of them, and I can't put my finger on all of them right now.
Yeah.
Other kids would remember some of them, but just stuff that would entertain us, that would amuse him
Sure.
as it amused us, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And Mom would just
Shake your head.
shake her head. She was very quiet when Dad was in a mood and was giving forth. Of course, she would hum when she got blessed, or when she was just thinking in her own head, and she would hum a song, a
Okay.
hymn or something. I never heard her do pop songs or anything like that, but I'm sure she knew some.
Well, she was quite literary. So did she tell you guys poems and things like that?
Well,
Or?
she got us reading books.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then what we like to do was ask her questions and discuss the books, or she would get us to answer questions about
Right.
what we read. So she was more interested in having us digest it and give something back to her, like a teacher does.
Right.
And so she really enriched our lives with the books. And Dad taught us how to argue,
Mm-hmm.
logic and deduction, discernment, discretion. He was always ready to debate, always ready to expose what he could see through as hype and salesmanship and just folly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was telling you about those times when the Southern Baptist had sent the evangelist up to Drumheller to
Okay.
his church because the denominations were interested in each other, I think. The Southern Baptist being so very successful and rich in the States, trying to help out the little struggling regular Baptist conference up in Canada. And so they got the arrangement to send some evangelists up to Canada and began to teach, at least in that church in Drumheller, the rebaptism by apostolic succession. If you hadn't been baptized by one of their leaders and apostles, you weren't really fully baptized, because they had those who had been baptized by others who had been baptized, who'd been baptized all the way back to the apostles. And they could demonstrate this somehow. I don't know how, but they could convince people that they needed to be rebaptized. And Dad saw through that, all that hype, and he says, there's no way, there's no evidence, they can't give me any demonstration that this is even true, and if it were true, it's not biblical.
Right.
So he was always ready to logically think through and investigate and expose error and the things that he just didn't consider helpful and wholesome.
He would have liked the case for Christ and kind of apologetics, or
Yes. Though he wasn't a great reader, and he didn't. Toward the end of his life, he was more and more convinced that you just didn't need to read anything but the Bible.
Right.
But he listened. He learned a lot by by listening to people and by discussing
Mm-hmm.
and debating and talking to people personally. Um,
Right.
his sister, Bessie, lived um, in Oregon, I believe, and maybe even Portland. And she brought her kids um, up to Canada with her for 1 week of holiday with our family in Drumheller.
Okay.